Good to see everybody. My name is Luke, and I'm here to talk to you today about how to have a really great party, which is, thank you for laughing. One of you laughed. I know you might be thinking to yourself, I don't necessarily think that Luke is probably the best expert on how to have a really great party. And if you were thinking that, you're actually right, because I generally stink at parties. When I was a kid, my mom, I always find this funny, she was like begging, and probably the only mom of a teenager, begging and pleading for me to go to like school dances and so I could talk to girls and have fun and all that kind of stuff, and I just like said no, complete no to that. The night of my junior prom, that party was very, very memorable, not because I went to the prom at all, instead I skipped the prom. And I know Todd would be proud. This is the night that I caught my first trout with a fly rod, was the night of my junior prom instead. I don't like to deal with like planning food for other people. So for instance, I'm guessing a whole bunch of you right here would say like, you couldn't pay me like $1 million to get up and stand and talk to a whole group of people like this. You know, I would rather talk to thousands of people than like plan the food for 10 people. Like that stresses me out. Decorations, I also stink at. So whenever we were having the first birthday party as a parent for our daughter, Audrey, she turned 1 year old, my sister-in-law called and she says, Luke, what's the theme for her birthday party? I didn't even know like I needed a theme. Like I had no clue that that was a thing for a party. I was like completely. So far, here's what if you're keeping track. I can't dance, I can't sing, I don't do food, I don't do decorations, and so in general, like I also kind of stink at celebrating as like a thing. So I'm not the party expert. So the good news for y'all today is that I'm not the one kind of sharing with you how to have a really great party. Instead, that honor goes to Jesus Christ. Which maybe you're also thinking, wait a second, that doesn't actually sound all that much better. Because my sense is, I think a lot of us in a church setting have a category for Jesus around, holy and loving. Like that makes sense. Jesus is holy and loving. You might even think of Jesus as something like courageous and interesting, but I actually doubt that you have a mental place to put Jesus Christ and like having a really great party in the same, like to mesh those together. You don't picture Jesus and immediately think, disco balls, DJs, fine wine. Well, it's a separate John 2. Read John 2, you might find that. In general, I don't think Christians or our culture more broadly think of Jesus as a leader in how to party really well. And my hope today is to significantly change that perception. And so we're in a series, we are kind of our summer series is listening to Jesus tell stories so that those stories can influence our life's story. And so today we're going to read from Luke chapter 14 about a story that Jesus tells into a parable. And we're going to let this story influence how we change ours. And so I'd like to invite you now to please stand for the reading of Scripture. My good friend Luke Strasser is going to come up and read our passage for us today.
All right, the reading comes from Luke chapter 14, verses 7 through 14. Now, he told a parable to those who were invited when he noticed how they chose the places of honor, saying to them, when you are invited by someone to a wedding feast, do not sit down in a place of honor, lest someone more distinguished than you be invited by him, and he who invited you both will come and say to you, give your place to this person. And then you will begin with shame to take the lowest place. But when you are invited, go and sit in the lowest place, so that when your host comes, he may say to you, friend, move up higher. Then you will be honored in the presence of all who sit at table with you. For everyone who exalts himself will be humbled, and he who humbles himself will be exalted." He said also to the man who had invited him, "When you give a dinner or a banquet, do not invite your friends or your brothers or your relatives or rich neighbors, lest they also invite you in return and you be repaid. But when you give a feast, invite the poor, the crippled, the lame, the blind, and you will be blessed because they cannot repay you, for you will be repaid at the resurrection of the just." The word of our Lord.
Have a seat. All right, so if you're tracking from last week and this week, you might already recognize that we have two sets of Jesus' stories. They both happened at parties at Pharisees' house, not the same Pharisee. Last week we talked about this woman who came during a dinner party and anointed Jesus' feet, tears on the muddy feet and hair to wipe them clean. And we learned that whoever is forgiven much loves much. Well, this week, later on in the Gospel of Luke, we come to another dinner party at a different Pharisee's house. And Jesus is an awfully interesting dinner party guest because he was there, and the very early in the get-together, he healed a guy who had dropsy, which is like an inflammation issue. And then after healing him, he corrected all the Pharisees who were the other guests at the house. And the last words before the passage that Luke just read say, and they, that's the Pharisees, could not reply to these things. So I kind of picture it like everyone looks around at this party like, boy, this party really died. You know, Jesus like confronting these people. Everybody's kind of like tension, at odds with each other. And then we come to the passage that Luke read, our passage for today, which starts with an idea that shows us exactly how courageous Jesus is. Because unlike me, who would generally witness a situation and then talk in condemning ways about a sinful situation to other people, Jesus is wildly courageous because what he does is he told a parable to those who were invited when he noticed how they chose the places of honor. So he literally is seeing this problem, and as soon as he sees this problem where, hey, look at this, all these people are fighting for who gets the most privileged position, I'm going to tell a story to those people about that issue, which is unbelievably courageous. But in addition, thank the Lord, to being unbelievably courageous, Jesus is also offers dignity to people who have issues. So instead of saying, hey, by the way, I see that you guys are fighting for the places of honor, so you stop fighting for the place of honor, sit over there, and you sit over here, and you guys are stop being jerks. He doesn't do any of that stuff. Instead, what he says is, when he tells a story. And the story is, when you're invited by someone to a wedding feast. So they're it's a Sabbath day, and they're at a dinner party, and he helps them to imagine not this situation, but just let's hypothetically pretend there's another situation down the road and you're now at a wedding feast at someone else's house. And then he tells them this story. And the story goes like this. Go to the next slide there, Gideon. When you are invited by someone to a wedding feast, do not sit down in a place of honor, lest someone more distinguished than you be invited by him, and he who invited you will both come and say to you, give your place to this person, and you will begin with shame to take the lowest place. So the idea there is if you go up and you take a high seat of honor, and then the person says, hey, no, that seat's not for you, move down here, that's a very shame-inducing idea. Which I think we might struggle with in 2026 in America because there's a lot of that story that you're probably thinking, why does it matter where in the world they sit at dinner? Like, just give me some food, I'll be good to go. A couple quick things about that. Number one is, as is still the case in the Middle East today, they live in a shame-honor culture. And so in their culture, it really matters whether you are honored by other people or shamed by other people in a way that's a little different than in our individualistic, innocent guilt culture we live in America. Number two is we don't really have a lot of situations for us nowadays where we go to a banquet of some sort and we can have the option of sitting where we want and then maybe potentially getting moved down, right? Like, I'm looking at y'all, like, I officiated a bunch of weddings of people in this group. We have seating charts, so that problem doesn't exist, right? Or maybe at Thanksgiving, like, so long as I'm not stuck at the kids' table, like, then I'm better at this big table or whatever, that kind of thing could be a deal. Or if you go out to eat with people, you're like, hey, I don't want to sit by the annoying talker that's going to talk my ear off, and I'd rather sit by my fun friend. Like, we have some parts of that, but we don't have it in the same sense that they had it in Jesus' day. However, because we are all humans and all humans have our own sinful tendency, we all carry the sinful desire for personal glory. So the same root cause that was a problem for them then also shows up with us nowadays. Here's some examples of what that might look like in 2026. If you go to some kind of gathering or get together or party or social event, whatever it is, a lot of us care how our appearance projects what kind of person we are. Are we attractive? Are we wealthy? What kind of car do we show up in, right? Like that kind of thing matters to us. We also worry, and there's a lot of jokes and memes and whatever about at a party, at a social event of some sort, do people see me as intelligent, right? Am I clever? Am I funny? Am I culturally aware? Like, what kind of person, like, how do people perceive me? Do they perceive me at a social gathering as kind of a person that's honorable, or do they perceive me as somebody who should be shamed because they don't fit in, they don't look right, they don't publicly present themselves the way we would wish? In fact, and I'm going to pretend like I know what some of you are thinking right now, we actually can have the exact same problem that Jesus was getting at with the Pharisees back then in the almost exact opposite way here in Mifflin County. Let me try to explain that. I think that our problem most often is not showing up in a tuxedo in a limousine to a social event and having people want to honor us and move us up to a great seat, this kind of thing. Our problem is that we want honor because we're going to project externally a sense of humility. I'm not the kind of person who gets dressed up for fancy events. I wear plain clothes. I'm not the kind of person who drives the real fancy new car. It's not a red sports car. It's just, this old truck, I think, here's what I'm trying to get at. Like, I don't use big words. I'm not like those rich, fancy people. But if you can see what I'm trying to say is, because that's an external action on our part, oftentimes we're doing the exact same thing where we're trying to get honor publicly by showing like the reverse of looking like we want honor. It's a wild situation, but I think the core human issue is we want people to think that we deserve glory. And even if we fake humility to look like we should get glory, it still is the same unhealthy root cause. So what does Jesus say we should do instead? Instead of that, when you're invited to a party, to a wedding gathering, to a whatever, go and sit in the lowest place. So that when your host comes, he can say to you, hey, friend, hey, move up higher. He may say to you, friend, move up higher. Then you'll be honored in the presence of all who sit at the table with you. For everyone who exalts himself will be humbled, and he who humbles himself will be exalted. The thing that I find most interesting about that set of verses is that Jesus does not guarantee that if you position yourself as humble, that you will get exalted by the host of the party. What he says is there's an opportunity if you go into a social gathering in a humble sense, there's an opportunity that the host may say to you, move up higher. And so there's this really interesting dynamic here where you can't use humility in a false way to get honor. You can't just, it's not like a currency, like I'm gonna pretend to be humble so that people honor me. No. You have to actually genuinely, in the inside, not on the externals, want to represent a humble person that cares about the honor of the other people around you. And then, oh, by the way, the host might see you. Depending on the host, they might see you and say, hey, this person is legit. They should get more honor because they have been more humble. In effect, what I'm trying to say is Jesus is inviting us to step into the question of faith, which is, if I exalt myself, will that cause humility? Or can I risk exalting myself and think that it's going to work for my good? Or if I humble myself, is that actually give me the potential, depending on the host of the party, to help me be exalted? Which way, how am I going to orient my life around that kind of a question? So, the first story that Jesus tells, there's two little stories in this passage here. The first little story is about taking the lower seat, having humility in order to get exalted. The second story, Jesus also courageously tells to the person it matters to, because he said to the man who had invited him. In other words, now he's going to talk about hosting the party. And what he's going to say about hosting the party, he's going to say to the person who is the host of this party. And what he says is, when you give a dinner or a banquet, do not invite your friends or your brothers or your relatives or your rich neighbors, lest they also invite you, and in return, and you be repaid. Like, you guys should be shocked. Like, somebody should be falling on the ground right now. Like, what kind of party planning advice is this? Put on a party. Don't have your friends and your relatives and your rich neighbors come over to your party. Like, there is nowhere in 2026 American culture that someone gives this kind of advice, right? And lest you go to the legalistic side of things, Jesus is not, like, this is not the Gospel of Luke, an official guide to how you should plan every single detail of your party. It's not a legalistic rule book, so it's not the worst thing in the world if you invite your friends to your kid's birthday party, or if you invite your kids' friends or whatever. Like, that's fine. That's not Jesus' point here. But his point here is actually something that matters. And his point is a tremendously great point. And you know it's a tremendously great point because you've gone to events, right? Whether it be a kid's birthday party, and the question is always, what gift can we give that shows how appreciative we are that we went to this kid's party, and I got to make sure that depending on the family and what they have and what that kid already has, I get a gift that's commensurate with that dynamic. Same thing for Christmas. I hate Christmas partly because I don't hate the Jesus part of Christmas, the gift-giving part, but partly because it ends up being just a bunch of transactions, you know? Well, if this person's going to spend this much on me, how much am I going to spend on them? You guys following what I'm saying? Like, that is not an easy part of that whole dynamic. So Jesus says, don't invite, not in a legalistic way, but don't think mainly about who you can have because they're going to be able to repay you back, because like that's just a business transaction. It's not a real fun party. What's his alternative option? Can you go to the next slide there, Gideon? But Jesus says, when you give a feast, invite the poor, the crippled, the lame, and the blind, and you'll be blessed because they cannot repay you. It's a wild instruction. It's like, hey, if you're having a party, find some people who are blind and crippled and poor and invite them, and then your party will be a lot more fun. It's not something that our brains, like, naturally in our culture wrap themselves around. And if we're going to trust Jesus, and we have to trust his words, like, why did he say these words if they're not true words? And if you don't like these words of his, then you got to wrestle with that, because we got to see if Jesus is actually trustworthy. And so I know, for instance, that those words are completely true. The reason I know that they're completely true is because I've literally seen exactly what he's saying here take place with my own eyes. Here's a story. This past year, for the first time, a bunch of Hope Collective churches joined together to put on this party that is called Night to Shine. So it's run by Tim Tebow Foundation, and the idea is that you put on an event that's kind of like a prom for people with disabilities. And very awesomely, a bunch of money came in, hundreds of volunteers said they would help, all this stuff happened, and then we get to the night of the event, and what we describe as the guests of honor, the kings and queens of the prom, start showing up. I'm going to get emotional. I don't know. I've been to 30 or 40 weddings in my life, bazillion kids' birthday parties. I went to one prom, if you remember. I went to my senior year. The year was the Trout year. I have never been involved in a party that was as much fun as Night to Shine. I cannot dance, and I found myself with the freedom of the people there in public, embarrassing myself by dancing. I cannot sing, and I was overjoyed when one of the guests started singing Hayden's song. My guy, who was my partner, his name is Dalen, is beautiful. He was awesome. He had Down syndrome. He asked to sing and then sang the Shania Twain hit. Anybody know what it was? Man, I Feel Like a Woman, right? It wasn't like a public comment on anything. It was just like literally there was more joy in that space. And the reason there was more joy in that space is because there was a whole bunch of people that it was not on their radar at all whether they could pay back for the party that they were benefiting from. There is something very, very, very profound about the idea of inviting people to a party, and that party bubbling up with grace instead of being focused on a material transaction, instead of worrying about who's going to repay who. This brings us back to the beginning and back to Jesus. And I know you might still not be convinced that Jesus is a really awesome person to reference who's super knowledgeable about how to have a good party. I'm going to try my best to explain why he is the expert in all things parties right now. The two stories we read, one was about having humility at a party and giving honor to other people, and the second was about inviting guests who cannot pay you back. And you might be tempted to walk out of here and say, I need to do better at being humble and not worrying about my own personal glory when I'm at a social gathering, when I'm out with people, when I'm doing whatever. That's good. That's all well and good. You might think, hey, I should have some people over to my house. I should do something. When I have my kid's party, I should invite this kid who might not get invited to this kind of stuff or whatever, right? All that stuff is good. But fundamentally, this whole sermon, Jesus' life is not just about creating a community of people in church that are like really good at throwing parties. Like, that's not really what it is. Because Jesus didn't just say, oh, by the way, y'all, you should be humble, because humble people get exalted at parties when they're authentically humble. He actually was that person. So you can go to the next slide there, Gideon. There's this beautiful sense of Jesus that, in addition to talking about how the Pharisees should operate at a party, when he was there telling them that story, he had left perfect glory to humbly come down into our sinful mess. He had left what was idyllic to come and in humility to count others as more significant than himself. Christ Jesus, as it tells us in Philippians 2, did not count equality with God a thing to be grasped, but he humbled himself. Like, he actually did it. He actually came and not just suffered by coming to earth, but ultimately suffered by dying on the cross, shedding his blood for the good, to honor those people around him that don't deserve to be honored, and to give us the opportunity to experience something that we don't deserve. And that's the reason, as Philippians tells us, that's the reason that Jesus was highly exalted. That's the reason that in the eternal party, every knee is going to bow. Everyone's going to spend forever and ever and ever worshiping Jesus, because he's the ultimate one who humbled himself. And that anything we do, if you show up at a party and you take a lower seat, we're only doing that in a way that pales in comparison to what Jesus has done already for you. But it doesn't stop there, because if you go to the next slide there, Gideon, Jesus' main mission was to do something to invite guests to an eternal party that we cannot pay him back for. You see, it's dumb to think that hosting a night to shine, and look at me, we did all this great stuff because we brought in all these people with disabilities and they had a really fun time and they taught us how to have fun. Like, yes, that's great, but that's not the point. The point is we are actually those people. If you're sitting here right now, God bless you, but you do not deserve to get into heaven. The only way we get into heaven is because Jesus didn't just tell the Pharisees at the dinner party, hey, by the way, don't invite all your rich friends and family and blah, 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 because they'll try to pay you back. Invite these people who know they don't deserve to be in, and then the party will be really fun, because Jesus, through his life and death and resurrection, invited us to the eternal party, and we know it's not going to be, we know we don't deserve it, so that's why it's going to be so much fun. And anybody who thinks they're going to deserve getting into heaven because of something they did, it's not going to increase the fun. Like, that's why you can't get into heaven. This is why Ephesians 2:8-9 is true. For by grace you've been saved through faith. It's not your own doing. It is a gift. And when we receive a gift that we cannot pay back, we're all sorts of bubbling up with joy. It's not the result of works. That way nobody can boast. And so I want to invite you, as we kind of wrap this up, if you go to the last slide there, Gideon, to really think about this seriously. I know it sounds crazy. Like, learn from Jesus how to party really well. I'm aware that that's not a sentence you've ever really thought of before. Learn from Jesus how to party really well. These themes are all throughout the scriptures. If you read Romans chapter 12, it talks about how we should outdo one another in showing honor. And that the point, whether you're at a party or whether you're at church or whether you're with your family or wherever you are, if we can live lives that outdo one another by showing honor to others, that, and not by wearing simple clothes or pretending like, hey, look at me, I went last in line at the buffet. It's really just so I can eat as much food as I want, not because I actually care about these people going forward. Like, the idea is, anytime we do those kinds of things, we're representing Jesus well, because he did it in the ultimate way. This is why James chapter 2 talks about, and this is a thing I've been wrestling with so much in my head now. I know that this church is in Reedsville, and most of us in this room are more affluent than most of the people in our community. You should not treat rich folks better in church. If we treat people who look nicer and are richer better, we're pretending that there's ways to earn what matters. We're pretending that honor only comes with what's external, not that it comes with people who are just people because God created them that way. And lastly, later on in Luke chapter 14, so we did verses 7 to 14. Later on, Jesus says something that is really striking. Tells another story, and it's all about this idea that like you should invite people to a party. If people don't come, then invite other people. Just find people that will come to the party. And he says, go out into the highways and the hedges and compel people to come in, that my house will be filled. As followers of Jesus, we have the greatest invitation to the greatest party. A party that is so good you cannot imagine showing up at a party where nobody is fighting to get more honor for themselves than what they deserve. A party where every single human being in there is there not because of anything they deserved, but because of what the host did to sacrifice himself to let them into that party. Jesus said, for I tell you that none of those men who are invited shall taste my banquet. If you got invited to Jesus' banquet and you're not let in, you're not going to get to taste that joy, not because Jesus doesn't want to give you that joy, because you don't have the humility to say, I have to accept a free gift that I cannot earn on my own. And so how does this affect us now? Yes, I certainly hope that we leave here and we have more humility. Yes, I certainly hope that our church and all of us as people invite folks who can't pay us back to things. Most fundamentally, though, it should change everything about now, knowing that we've been invited by Jesus to the greatest eternal, glorious party that's going to last forever and ever. And why on God's green earth will we not want to invite more people to that? Let me pray. Heavenly Father, I thank you that you have given us this gift of the gospel. The gift that says we can get something that we do not deserve. So we don't have to stress about boasting about it anyhow. I pray that you would give us a great vision for the joy that is set before us. It's what helped you to endure the cross. I pray that it would help us to endure our crosses, which are not as big, to represent you well, and to invite many, many, many others to go out into the highways and the hedges and find anybody who can have the one thing necessary to get into your eternal party, which is the humility to know that we don't deserve it. I pray this all in Jesus' name. Amen.